In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Now that I have found the beauty in me, and with myself, I spoke to my serpent. I look back as onto a work that has been accomplished. The serpent says, nothing is accomplished yet. And I say, what do you mean, not accomplished? And the serpent answers, this is only the beginning. Carl Gustav Jung says, I think that you are lying. And the serpent says, whom are you quarreling with? Do you know better? And Carl says, I know nothing. But I'd already gotten used to the idea that we had reached a goal, at least a temporary one. If even the dead are about to become extinct, what else is going to happen? The serpent says, but then the living must first begin to live. I sense some Zarathustra in there. Jung says, this remark could have certainly been deeply meaningful, but it seems to be nothing but a joke. And the serpent says, you are getting impertinent. I am not joking. Life has yet to begin. Carl says, what do you mean by life? I say life is yet to begin. Didn't you feel empty today? Do you call that life? The serpent says. What you say is true. I try to put a good face as I can on everything and to settle for things. Carl says. The serpent responds, that might be quite uncomfortable. You really ought to make much higher demands. And Jung says, that I dread, I will certainly not assume that I could satisfy my own demands, but neither do I think that you are capable of satisfying them. However, it might be that once again I am not trusting you enough. I suppose that might be so because I've drawn closer to you in human terms, and I find you so urbane. That proves nothing, the serpent says. Just don't assume that somehow you could ever grasp me and embody me. And Carl says, so what should it be? I'm ready. You are entitled to a reward for what has been accomplished so far, the serpent says. A sweet thought, a payment could be made for this, Carl says. And the serpent answers, I give you payment in images. Behold. Elijah and Salome. The cycle is completed, and the gates of the mystery have opened again. Elijah leads Salome to seeing one by the hand as she blushes and lowers her eyes while lovingly batting her eyelids. Here, I give you Salome, may she be yours. For God's sake, I said, what should I do with Salome? I am already married. And we are not among the Turks, Jung says. Elijah says, you helpless man, how ponderous you are. Is this not a beautiful gift? Is her healing not your doing? Won't you accept her love as the well-deserved payments of your trouble? Girl says, it seems to me rather strange gift, more burden than joy. I'm happy that Salome is thankful to me and loves me. I love her too, somewhat. Incidentally, the care I afforded her was literally pressed out of me rather than something I gave freely and intentionally. If my partly unintentional ordeal has had such a good outcome, I'm already completely satisfied. Salome says to Elijah, leave him. He is a strange man. Heaven knows what his motives are. but he seems to be serious. I'm not ugly, and surely I'm generally desirable. And then Salome says to Carl Gustav Jung, why do you refuse me? I want to be your maid and to serve you. I will sing and dance before you, fend off people for you, comfort you when you are sad, and laugh when you are happy. I will carry all your thoughts in my heart, and I will kiss the words that you speak to me. I will pick roses for you each day, and my thoughts will wait upon you and surround you. Jung says, I thank you for your love. It is beautiful to hear you speak of love. If it is music and old, far-off homesickness, look, and my tears are falling because of your good words. And I want to kneel before you and kiss your hands 100 times because they want to give me love. You speak so beautifully of love. One can never hear enough of that love being spoken. Salome says, why only speak? I want to be yours utterly and completely yours. Wink, wink. Jung says, you are like the serpent that is coiled around me and pressed out my blood. Your sweet words wind around me, and I stand like someone who is crucified. Salome says, why still crucified? And Jung says, don't you see that an unrelenting necessity has flung me onto this cross? There is an impossibility that lames me. Salome says, don't you want to break through necessity? Is what you call necessity really one? Listen, Jung says, I doubt that it is your destiny to belong to me. I do not want to intervene in your utterly singular life, since I can never help you to lead it to an end. And what do you gain if one day I must lay you aside like a worn garment? And Salome says, your words, they're terrible. But I love you so much that I could also lay myself aside when your time has come. Jung says, I know that it would be the greatest torment for me to let you go away, but if you can do this for me, I can also do it for you. I would go on without lament, since I have not forgotten the dream where I saw my body laying on the sharp needles and the bronze wheel rolling over my breast, crunching it. I must think of this dream whenever I think of love. If it must be, I am ready. Salome says, I don't want such a sacrifice. I just want to bring you joy. Can I not be a joy to you? And Jung says, I don't know, perhaps not. So then at least try. The attempt is the same as the act. Such attempts are costly, Jung says, and Salome responds, won't you bear the cost for my sake? And Carl says, I am rather too weak, too exhausted after what I had suffered because of you, still to be able to undertake further tasks for you. I would be overwhelmed. If you don't want to accept me, Salome says, then surely I cannot accept you. It is not a matter of acceptance. If it is about anything in particular, it is about giving. And Salome says, but I do give myself to you. Just accept me. As if that would settle the matter, Jung exclaims, but being entangled with love, simply thinking about it is dreadful. Salome says, so you really demand that I be and not be at the same time? That is impossible. What is wrong with you? I lack the strength, Carl says, to hoist another fate onto my shoulders. I have enough to carry. But what if I help you bear this load? Salome asks. How can you? You have to carry me. An untamed burden. Shouldn't I have to carry it myself? And Elijah speaks up and says, you speak the truth. May each one carry his own load. He who wants to burden others with his baggage is their slave. It is not too difficult for anyone to lug themselves. Here's Jung again with this idea: is you shouldn't look for help. I think it's interesting. We talk about the cult and magic and all this kind of stuff. I've been talking a lot. Whenever it comes up, I've been saying that it's becoming aware to me that it's more of I take it as a philosophy of radical responsibility, self-responsibility. Maybe that's what I should say. And Jung here, this is like the 4th or 5th time he kind of slips it in, where he's like, if you're suffering, don't look to the person beside you for help. It's your personal problem. If you're going to gain the salvation, you're going to gain your personal, this is Gnostic Jung, right? You're going to gain your personal salvation by dealing with this problem personally yourself and not looking for help. I love it. Salome says, but Father, couldn't I help bear part of his burden? And Elijah said, then he to be your slave. And Salome says, or my master, my ruler. That I shall not be. You should be free from being. I can bear neither slaves nor masters. I long for men, Carl Gustav Jung says. And Salome responds, am I not a human being? Be your own master and your own slave. Do not belong to me, but to yourself. Again, this is like Ayn Randian, Zarathustra, Crowley-ish, all coming out of Carl Gustav Jung here. Be your own master and your own slave, and do not belong to me, but yourself. Do not bear my burden, but your own. Thus you leave me my human freedom. A thing that's worth more than me than the right ownership over another person. And Salome asks, are you sending me away? And Carl says, I am not sending you away. You must be far from me. But give to me out of your fullness, not your longing. I cannot satisfy your poverty, just as you cannot still my longing. If your harvest is rich, send me some fruit from one of your gardens. If you suffer from abundance, I will drink from the brimming horn of your joy. I know that you will be a balm for me, and I can satisfy myself only at the table of the satisfied, not at the empty bowls of those who yearn. I will not steal my payment. You possess nothing, so how can you give? Insofar as you give, you demand Elijah, old man, listen. You have strange gratitude, but do not give away your daughter, but sell her on her own feet. She would like to dance and to sing and to play the lute for the people. And she would like their flashing coins thrown before her feet. Salome, I thank you for your love. If you really love me, dance before the crowd. Please people so that they praise your beauty and your art. And if you have a rich harvest, throw me one of your roses through the window. And if the fount of your joy overflows, dance and sing to me once more. I long for the joy of men in their fullness, if freedom will, and not their neediness. There it is again, a little backhanded way. Salome says, what is hard and incomprehensible man you are. And Elijah said, you have changed since I last saw you, Carl Gustav Jung. You speak another language, one that sounds foreign to me. My dear old man, Carl says, I think I'd like to believe that you find me changed, but you too seem to have changed. Where is your serpent? And Elijah says, she has gone astray. I believe she was stolen. Since then, things that have been somewhat gloomy with us. Therefore, I would have been happy if you had at least accepted my daughter. Carl Gustav Jung says, I know where your serpent is. I have her. We fetched her from the underworld. She gave me hardness, wisdom, and magical power. We need her in the upper world, since otherwise the underworld would have had the advantage to our determent. And Elijah said, away with you, you cursed robber. May God punish you. Your curse is powerless, Jung says. Whoever possesses the serpent cannot be touched by curses. No, be sensible, old man. Whoever possesses wisdom is not greedy for power. Only the man who has power declines to use it. Don't cry, Salome. Fortune is only what you yourself create, and not what comes to you. Begone, my unhappy friends. The night grows late, and Elijah expunged the false gleam of power from your wisdom. And you, Salome, for the sake of our love, do not forget to dance.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Abracast, and I am John Towers. We are still working on the red book, Liber Novus, by Carl Gustav Jung, and we have been in the last chapter we're going to cover here for a couple episodes now. This chapter is entitled The Magician, and a lot of wild shit's happened already. He's fighting and killing shit demons. He's uniting the Trinity with the devil. He's talking to serpents and all kinds of crazy shit's going on. So I want to get right into it here, continuing with it. Let's see, where was I? Love. He's talking about love. Love, I believe, belongs to others, but my love wants to be with me. I dread it. May the power of my thinking push it from me into the world, into things, into men. For something should join men together. Something should be a bridge. It is the most difficult temptation I have ever, if even my love wants me. Mysteries, open your curtains again. I want to wage this battle to the end. Come here, serpent of the dark abyss. He summons his serpent back. I hear Salome is crying. What does she want? Or what do I still want? It's damnable payment you have given to me. A payment that one cannot touch without sacrifice. One that requires even greater sacrifice once one has touched it. And the serpent answers, do you mean to live without sacrifice? Life must cost you something, mustn't it? I have. I believe I already paid. I've rejected Salome. That's not sacrifice enough. Too little for you, the serpent says. As has been said, you are allowed to make demands of yourself. You mean well, Carl says. Your damned logic, demanding in sacrifice. What is what I understood. My error was obviously has obviously been to my own benefit. Tell me, isn't it enough that I force my feelings into the background? Nope. Nope. Serpent, you are not forcing your feelings into the background at all. Rather, it suits you much better not to agonize further over Salome. Carl says, if you're speaking the truth, it's quite bad. Is that why Salome is still crying? Yes, it is, the serpent says. But what is to be done? Carl asks. Oh, you want to act? One can also think. Well, what is there to think? I confess that I know nothing to think here. Perhaps you have advice. I have the feeling that I must soar over my head, and I can't do that. What do you think? And the serpent says, I think nothing, and have no advice either. And Jung says, so ask the beyond. Go to heaven or hell, or perhaps there is advice there. And the serpent answers that I'm being pulled upward, he says. Then the serpent turned into a small white bird which soared into the clouds, where she disappeared. My gaze followed her for a long time. And the bird says, hey, do you hear me? I'm far off now. Heaven is so far away. Hell is much nearer to earth. I found something for you, a discarded crown. It lay on the street in the immeasurable space of heaven, a golden crown. Now it already lies in my hands, a golden royal crown with lettering incised within. And what does it say? It says, love never ends. It's a gift from heaven, but what does it mean? And the bird says, here I am. You are, here I am. Are you satisfied? Partially, Jung says. At any rate, I thank you for this meaningful gift, but it is mysterious, and your gift makes me well nigh suspicious. But the gift come from heaven, you know. It's certainly very beautiful, but you know very well what we have grasped of heaven and hell. And the bird answers, don't exaggerate, after all. There is a difference between heaven and hell. I certainly believe, to judge from what I have seen, that just a little happens in heaven as in hell, though probably in another way. Even what does not occur cannot occur in a particular way. Jung says, you speak in riddles. What could make one ill if one took them to heart? Tell me, what do you make of this crown? And the bird says, what do I make of it? Nothing. It truly speaks for itself. And Jung says, you mean through the inscription it bears? Precisely, the bird answers. I presume that makes sense to you. To some extent, Jung says, I suppose, but that keeps the question awfully in suspense. Which is how it is meant to be, the bird says. Now the bird suddenly turned into the serpent again. And Jung says, you're unnerving. Where's my highlighter? You're unnerving. The serpent says, only for him who isn't in agreement with me. That I am certainly not. But how could one? To hang in the air in such a way is gruesome. And the serpent says, is this sacrifice too difficult for you? You must also not be able to hang if you want to solve the problem. Look at Salome. To Salome. Jung says to Salome, I see, Salome, that you are still weeping. You are not yet done. I hoover and curse my hoovering. I am hanging up for your sake and for mine. First I was crucified, and now I'm simply hanging. Which is less noble, but no less agonizing. Forgive me for wanting to do you in. I thought of saving you as I did. When I healed your blindness through my self-sacrifice, perhaps I must be decapitated a third time for your sake. Like your earlier friend John, who brought us the Christ of agony. Wow, that's a good one. Do you still see no way to become reasonable? And Salome weeps, my beloved, what can I do for you? I have utterly forsaken you. Boo-hoo! Boo! Jung says, so why are you still crying? You know I can't bear seeing you in tears. And Salome says, I thought that you were invulnerable since you possessed the black serpent rod. The effect of the rod seems doubtful to me, Carl says, but in one respect it does help me. At least I do not suffocate. Although I have been strung up, the magical rod apparently helps me bear the hanging. Surely a gruesome good deed and aid. I don't want to cut the cord. Salome says, "How can I? Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. You are hanging too high on the summit of the tree of life, where I cannot reach. Can't you help yourself? You're a knower of the serpent wisdom. You must go station to station." On the tree of life. You get it? "Must I go hanging for long?" And Salome says, "Until you have devised help for yourself." And Jung says, "So at least tell me what you think of the crown that the bird of my soul fetched for me from heaven." Salome says, "What are you saying? A crown? You have the crown? Lucky one. What are you complaining about?" So this whole thing is hilarious to me because in my mind, the theater of my mind's eye, right? I see Jung like crucified, hanging up in the air, like I don't know, like a mile up in the air or something, screaming down to Salome, who's like underneath in the shade of a tree or a giant rock, sitting there crying, and he's like, "Hey, Salome! What do you think of this crown?" "A hanged king would like to change places with every blessed beggar in the country road who has not been hanged." Salome, who's ecstatic, says, "The crown! You have the crown!" And Jung says, "Salome, take pity on me. What is it with this crown?" Salome, who's still ecstatic, says, "The crown! You are to be crowned! What blessedness for me and for you!" Jung says, "Alas, what do you want with the crown? I can't understand it, and I'm suffering unspeakable torment." And Salome, who says cruelly, "Hang until you understand." I remain silent and hang high above the ground on the swaying branch of the divine tree for whose sake the original ancestors could not avoid sin. My hands are bound and I am completely helpless, so I hang for 3 days and for 3 nights. Contemplate this on the tree of woe. From where should help come? There sits my bird, the serpent, which has put on her white feather dress. The bird says, we'll fetch help from the clouds trailing above your head, when nothing else is of help to us. You want to fetch help from the clouds. How is that possible? Jung says. And the bird says, I will go and try. The bird swings off like a rising lark, becoming smaller and smaller, and finally disappears into the thick gray veil of clouds covering the sky. My gaze follows her longingly, and I make out nothing more than the endless gray cloud sky above me, impenetrably gray, harmoniously gray and unreadable. But the writing on the crown, that is legible. Love never ends. Does that mean eternal hanging? I was not wrong to be suspicious when the bird brought the crown of eternal life, the crown of martyrdom. Ominous things are dangerously ambiguous. I am weary not only of hanging, but of struggling after the immeasurable. The mysterious crown lies far below my feet on the ground, winking gold. I do not hover, no, I hang, or rather worse. I am hanging between the sky and the earth. It's a precarious place. He's the axis mundi. He's where the material and the spiritual, the vulgar and the divine, the horizon I do not tire of the state of hanging, for I could indulge in it forever. But love never ends. It is really true. Shall love never end? If this was a blessed message to them, was it for me? That depends entirely on the notion, an old raven suddenly said, perched on a branch not far from me, awaiting the funeral meal, and immersed in philosophizing. What does it depend entirely on the notion? Or why does it depend entirely on the notion? The raven says on the notion of love and the other. Jung says, I know, unlucky old bird. You mean heavenly and earthly love. Heavenly love would be utterly beautiful. But we are men, and precisely because we are men, I have set my mind on being a complete and full-fledged man. And the raven says, you are an ideologue. Dumb raven, be gone, Carl Gustav Jung says while he's hung up on the tree of life. There, very close to my face, a branch moves. A black serpent has coiled itself around, and it looks at me with the blinding, pearly shimmer of its eyes. Is it not my serpent? Sister and black rod of magic, where do you come from? Sister and black rod of magic, where do you come from? I thought that I saw you fly to heaven as a bird, and now you are here. Did you bring help? And the serpent says, I am only my own half. I'm not one but two. I'm the one and the other. I am here only as the serpent like the magical, but the magic is useless here. I wound myself idly around this branch to wait further developments. You can use me in life, but not in hanging, in the worst case. I am ready to lead you to Hades. I know the way there. A black form condenses before me out of the air. Satan, with scornfully laugh, he calls to me. See what comes from the reconciliation of the opposites. Recant, and in a flash you will be down on the greening earth. Jung says, I won't recant. I'm not stupid. If such is the outcome of all of this, then let it be the end. And the serpent says, where is your inconsistency? Please remember this important rule of the art of life. Jung says, the fact that I'm hanging here is inconsistency enough. I've lived inconsistently ad nauseum. What more do you want? And the serpent says, perhaps inconsistency in the right places. Stop it, Carl says. How should I know what the right and the wrong places are? And Satan says, whoever gets on the sovereign way with the opposites knows the left from the right. Be quiet. You are an interested party. If only my white bird came back with help. I fear that I'm growing weak. Don't be stupid, the serpent says. Weakness, too, is a way. Magic makes good the error. And Satan says, Satan says, what you have not yet once had the courage of weakness. You want to become a complete man? Men are strong. The white bird of mine, I suppose you can find your way back. Did you get up and leave because you couldn't live without me? Ah, Salome, there she comes. Come to me, Salome. Another night has passed, and I didn't hear you cry. But I hung, and still hang. Salome says, I haven't cried anymore. For good fortune and misfortune are balanced in me. My white bird has left me. My white bird has left and not yet returned. I know nothing and understand nothing. Does this have to do with the crown? Speak. What should I say? Ask yourself. I cannot. My brain is like lead, Carl says. I can only whimper for help. I have no way of knowing whether everything is falling or standing still. My hope is with this white bird. Oh no, could it be that the bird means the same thing as hanging? And Satan says, reconciliation of the opposites, equal rights for all, follies. I hear a bird chirping. Is that you? Have you come back? And the bird says, if you love the earth, you are hanged. If you love the sky, you hover. What is the earth? What is sky? Everything under you, the earth, and everything above you is the sky. If you fly, if you strive for what is above you, you are hanged. If you strive for what is below you, what is below? What is above? What is below? What is beneath? Above you is what is before, and above you, beneath you, is what comes back under you. And the crown, solve the riddle of the crown for me. And the bird said, the crown and the serpent are opposites and are one. Do you not see the serpent that crowned the head of the crucified? What? I don't understand you. What words did the crown bring you? Love never ends. That is the mystery of the crown and the serpent, the bird said. Jung says, but Salome, what should happen to Salome? And the bird said, you see, Salome is what you are. Fly, and she will grow wings, and the clouds part. And the sky is full of crimson sunset. And the complete third day, the sun sinks into the sea, and I glide with it from the top of the tree towards the earth, softly and peacefully. Night falls. Fear has befallen me. Whom did you carry to the mountain, you Kabiri? And whom have I sacrificed in you? You piled me up yourselves, turning me into the tower on inaccessible crags, turning me into my church, my monastery, my place of execution, my prison. I am locked up and condemned within myself. I am my own priest. My congregation, judge and judged, God and human sacrifice. What is the work you have accomplished? Kabiri, you have given birth to the cruel law from the chaos that cannot be revoked. It is understood and accepted. The completion of the secret operation approaches. What I saw, I described in words to the best of my ability. Words are the poor, and the beauty does not attend them. But it is truth, beautiful, and beauty true. Whoa. All right, let's do this. Come on!
Learn more at Abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at Subscribestar.com.
Hey, just want to remind everyone to check out Abracast.com. Featured topic link and the Storefront tarot cards, vessels of the art, bunch of fly-ass t-shirts. And also a quick reminder that we're going to be scheduling some time off pretty soon. That time off is in conjunction with the 5th year anniversary of the program. So if you see anything weird going on in the feed, whatever podcatcher or app that you use to listen to the show, don't worry, it's all normal. So, okay, enough with that. One can speak in beautiful words about love, but what about life? And life stands above love. But love is the inescapable mother of life. Life should never be forced into love, but love into life. Nay, love be subject to torment, but not life. As long as love goes pregnant with life, it should be respected. But if it has given birth to the life from itself, it is turned into an empty sheath that expires into transcendence. I speak against the mother who bore me. I separate myself from the bearing womb. I speak no more for the sake of love, but for the sake of life. The word has become heavy for me. It barely wrestles itself free from the soul. Bronze doors have shut. Fires have burned out and sunk into ashes. Wells have been drained, and where there were seas, there is dry land. My tower stands in the desert. Happy is he who can be a hermit in his own desert. He survives. Not the power of the flesh, but of love should be broken for the sake of life. And since life stands above love, a man needs his mother until his life has developed. Then he separates from her. And so life needs love until it is developed, and then it'll cut loose from it. The separation from the child, from the mother, is difficult, but the separation of life from the love is harder. Love seeks to have and to hold, but life wants more. The beginning of all things is love, but the being of things is life. The distinction is terrible. Why, O spirit of the dark depths, do you force me to say that whoever loves does not live, and whoever lives does not love? I always get it backwards. Should everything be turned to its opposite? Will there be a sea where Philemon's temple stands? Will his shady island sink into the deepest ground, into the whirlpool of the withdrawing flood that earlier swallowed all peoples and lands? Will the bottom of the sea where Ararat rises? What repulsive words do you mutter, you mute son of the earth? What do you want to sever my soul's embrace? You, my son, do you want to thrust yourself between? Who are you? And who gives you the power? Everything that I strove for, everything that I wrestled from myself, do you want to reverse it again? Are you the son of the devil, to whom everything holy is inimical or grow overpowering? You frighten me. Let me be happy in the embrace of my own soul, and do not disturb the peace of the temple. Off with you. You pierce me with paralyzing force, for I do not want your way. Should I languidly fall at your feet, you devil? And you son of the devil, speak! Your silence is unbearable, and of awful stupidity. I won my soul. And what? I won my soul, and to what did she give birth for me? You monster, you son, a son, ha! A frightful miscreant, a stammerer, a newt's brain, you primordial lizard! You want to be king of the earth. You want to banish proud, free men and bewitch beautiful women. Break up castles, rip open the belly of old cathedrals, dumb thing. A lazy, blue, bug-eyed frog that wears pondweed on his skull pate. And you want to call yourself my son? You're no son of mine. But the spawn of the devil, the father of the devil, entered into the womb of my soul, and you became flesh. I recognize you, Philemon, and most cunning of all fraudsters. You have deceived me. You impregnated my maidenly soul with the terrible worm. Philemon, damned charlatan, you aped the mysteries. For me, you lay the mantle of the stars on me. You played Christ's fool. You played a Christ fool's comedy with me. You hanged me carefully and ludicrously in the tree, just like Odin. You let and Conan contemplate this on the tree of woe, and you let me devise runes to enchant Salome, and meanwhile you procreated with my soul with the worm, spew of the dust, deception upon deception, terrible devil trickery. You gave me the force of magic, you crowned me, you clad me with the shimmer of power, and you let me play would-be Joseph father to your son. You lodged a puny basilisk into the nest of the dove. My soul, you adulterous whore, you became pregnant with this bastard, and I am dishonored. I, laughable father of the Antichrist, how I misunderstand you. How poor was my mistrust that it could not gauge the magnitude of this infamous act. Why do you break apart? You broke love and life in twain. From the ghastly sunderings, the frog and the son of the frog come forth, ridiculous, disgusting sight, irresistible advent. They will sit on the banks of the sweet water and listen to the nocturnal song of the frogs, since their god has been born as a son of the frogs. Where is Salome? Where is the unresolvable question of love? No more questions. My gaze turned to the coming things, and Salome is where I am. The woman follows you strongest, not you. Thus she bears your children in both good and bad way. As I stood alone on the earth, which was covered by rain clouds and falling night, my serpent crept up to me and told me a story. Once upon a time there was a king, and he had no children, but he would have liked to have a son. So he went to a wise woman who lived as a witch in the forest and confessed all his sins, as if she were a priest appointed by God. To this she said, "Dear king, you have done what you should not have done. But since it has come to pass, and we will have to see how you can do better in the future, take a pound of otter lard and bury it in the earth, and let 9 months pass, then dig up the place again and see what you find." So the king went to his house, ashamed and saddened because he had humiliated himself before the witch in the forest. Yet he listened to her advice, and he dug up a hole in the garden at night, and he placed a pot of otter lard in it, which he had obtained with some difficulty. Then he let 9 months go by. After this time had passed, he went again into the night, into the place where the pot lay buried, and he dug it up. And to his great astonishment, he found a sleeping infant in the pot. Although the lard had disappeared, he took out the infant and jubilantly brought it to his wife, and she took it immediately to her breast, and behold, her milk flowed freely. And so the child thrived and became great and strong, and he grew into a man who was greater and stronger than all others. When the king's son was 20 years old, he came before his father, and he said, "I know that you have produced me through sorcery, and that I was not born as one of men. You have made me from the repentance of your sin, and that has made me strong. I am born from no woman, which makes me clever. I am strong and clever, and therefore I demand the crown of the realm from you." And the old king was startled at his son's knowledge, but even more by his impetuous longing for regal power. He remained silent, and he thought, "What has produced you, otter lard? Who bore you? The womb of the earth. I drew you from a pot. A witch humiliated me." And he decided to let his son be killed secretly. But because his son was stronger than others, he feared him, therefore he wanted to take refuge in a trick. He went again to the sorceress in the forest, and he asked for her advice. And she said, "Dear king, you confess no sin to me this time because you want to commit a sin. I advise you to bury another pot with other otter lard and leave it to lie in the earth for 9 months, then dig it out again and see what happened. And the king did what the sorceress advised him, and thenceforth his son became weaker and weaker. And when the king returned to the place where the pot lay after 9 months, he could dig up his son's grave at the same time, and he lay the dead one in the fosse behind the empty pot. The king was saddened, but when he could no longer master his melancholy, he returned yet again to the sorceress one night and asked her for advice. She spoke to him. Dear king, you wanted a son, but the son wanted to be king himself. Also had the power and the cleverness for it, but you wanted your son no more. Because of this, you lost your son. Why are you complaining? You have everything, dear king, that you wanted. But the king said, you are right, I wanted it so, but did not want this melancholy. Do you have any remedies to remove remorse? And the sorceress spoke. Dear king, go to your son's grave and fill the pot again with otter lard after 9 months, and you will, after 9 months, see what you find in the pot. And the king did this, and he had been commanded, and henceforth he became happy and did not know why. When the 9 months passed, he dug up the pot again, and the body had disappeared, but the pot lay there, a sleeping infant, and he realized that the infant was his dead son. He took the infant himself, and henceforth he grew as much in a week as other infants grow in a year. And when 20 weeks had passed, his son came before his father again and claimed his realm. And the father had learned from the experience he already knew for a long time how everything would turn out. After the son had voiced his demand, the old king got up from his throne, embraced his son with tears of joy, and crowned him king. And so the son who had thus become king was grateful to his father and held him in high esteem, as long as his father was granted life. But I spoke to the serpent. So here, the story's over, right? But I spoke to the serpent. In truth, my serpent, I didn't know that you were also a teller of fairy tales. So tell me, how should I interpret your fairy tale? And the serpent said, imagine that you were the old king and have a son. Well, who is the son? The serpent said, well, I thought that you had just spoken of a son who doesn't make you very happy. And Carl says, what? You don't mean that I should crown him? Yeah, who else, the serpent says, is uncanny. But what about the sorceress? The sorceress is a motherly woman whose son you should be, since you are a child renewing himself in you. Oh no, Jung said. Will it be impossible for me to be a man? And the serpent says, sufficient manhood and beyond that fullness of childhood, which is why you need the mother. And Carl says, I am ashamed to be a child. And the serpent says, and thus you kill your son. A creator needs the mother, since you are not a woman. But this terrible truth, Jung says, I thought and I hoped that I could be a man in every way. You cannot do this for the sake of the son, the serpent said. To create means mother and child. The thought that I must remain a child is unbearable, Jung says. For the sake of your own son, you must be a child and leave him the crown. I thought that I must remain a child is the thought that I must remain a child is humiliating and shattering, Carl says. A salutary antidote against the power. The serpent says, don't resist being a child, otherwise you resist your son, whom you want above all. It is true that the son and survival, but the price for this is high. The son stands higher. You are smaller and weaker than the son. The bitter truth, but it can't be avoided. Don't be defiant. Children must be well behaved. Damned scorn. Carl says, man of mockery, the serpent says. I'll have my patience with you. My well should flow for you and pour forth the drink of salvation. If all lands parch with the thirst and everyone comes to you begging for the water of life, so subject yourself to the sun. Where am I going to take hold of this immeasurable? My knowledge and ability are poor, my power is not enough, Jung says. At which the serpent curled up and gathered herself into knots and said, Do not ask after the morrow, sufficient unto you is the day. You need not worry about the means, let everything grow, let everything sprout. The sun grows out of himself. So this is reusing imagery from earlier, like the Red Rider episodes and the episodes around there where he was growing plants on his body, and then when he was with the hermit in the desert, and the sun sun was sucking energy out of him, and then re-giving him energy. This is a symbolic double entendre. The myth commences, the one that needs only be lived, not sung, the one that sings itself, the subject myself to the sun, the one engendered by sorcery, the unnaturally born, the son of the frogs who stands at the waterside and speaks with his father and listens to the nocturnal singing. Truly he is full of mysteries and superior in strength to all men. No man has produced him, and no woman has given birth to him. The absurd has entered the age-old mother, and the son has grown the deepest ground. And he springs up and was put to death. He rose again in the deepest ground and sprang up and was put to death. And he rose again, and he produced anew in the way of sorcery. He grew more swiftly than before. I gave him the crown that unites the separated, and he united the separated for me. I gave him the power and thus commands, since he is superior in strength and cleverness to all. I did not give way to him willingly, but out of insight. No man binds above and below together, but he who did not grow like a man and yet has the form of a man is capable in binding them. My power is paralyzed, but I survive in my son. I set aside my concern that he may master the people. I am solitary. The people rejoice at him. I was powerful. Now I'm powerless. I was strong, and now I am weak. Since then, he has risen to take the strengths into himself. Everything has turned itself upside down for me. I love the beauty of the beautiful, the spirit, those rich in spirit, the strength of the strong. I laughed at the stupidity of the stupid. I despised the weakness of the weak, the meanness of the mean, the hatred and the badness of the bad. And now I must love the beauty of the ugly, the spirit of the foolish, the strength of the weak. I must admire the stupidity of the clever. I must respect the weakness of the strong, and the meanness of the generous, and honor the goodness of the bad. Where does not leave mockery, contempt, and hatred? And went over to the son as a token of power. His mockery is bloody and contemptuous. His eyes flash. His hatred is a singing fire, inevitable one. You son of the gods, how can one fail to obey you? He broke me in two. He cut me up. He yokes the separated. Without him, I would fall apart. But my life went on with him. My love remained with me. Thus I entered solitude with a black look on my face, full of resentment and outrage at my son's dominion. How could my son arrogate my power? I went into the garden and I sat down in a lonely spot on the rocks by the water, and I brooded darkly. I called the serpent my nocturnal companion, who lay with me on the rocks through many twilights, imparting her serpent wisdom. But then my son emerged from the water, great and powerful, the crown on his head with a swirling lion's mane, shimmering serpent skin covering his body, and he says to me, I come to demand your life. What do you mean? Have you even become a god? I rise again, he says. I have become flesh. Now I return to the eternal glitter and shimmer. I return to the eternal embers of the sun and leave your earthliness. You will remain with men. You have been in immortal company for long enough. Your work belongs to the earth. What a speech, I said. Weren't you wallowing in the earth and just underneath? And he says, I've become man and beast, and now ascend again to my own country. And where is your country, Jung says. The light in the egg in the sun was what is innermost and compressed in the eternal longing embers. So rises the sun in your heart and streams out of the cold world. And Jung says, how you transfigure yourself. And the sun says, I want to vanish from your sight. You ought to live in darkest solitude. Men, not gods, should illuminate your darkness. How hard and solemn you are. I'd like to bathe your feet with my tears and dry them with my hair. I'm raving. Am I a woman? The sun says, also a woman, also a mother, pregnant, giving birth, awaits you. And Jung says, oh, Holy Spirit, grant me a spark of your eternal light. And the sun says, you are with child. What? And Jung says, I feel the torment. I fear the desolation of pregnant women. Do you go from me, my God? And he says, you have the child. And Jung says, my soul, do you still exist? You serpent, you frog, you magically produced a boy whom my hands buried. You ridiculed, despised, hated one who appeared to me in a foolish form. Woe betide those who have seen their souls and felt it with the hands. I am the powerless in your hand, my God. The sun says, your pregnant woman belongs to fate. Release me, I rise to the eternal realm. Will I never hear your voice again, O damned deception? Jung said, what am I asking? You'll talk to me again tomorrow. You'll chat over and over in the mirror. Do not rail, the sun says. I will be present and not present, and you will hear and you will not hear, and I will be and not be. You utter gruesome riddles, Jung said. And the sun said, such is my language, and to you I leave the understanding no one besides you has your God. He is always with you, yet you see him in others, and thus he is never with you. You strive to draw yourself those who seem to possess your God. You will come to see that they do not possess him, and that you alone have him. Thus you are alone among men, the crowd, and yet solitude and multitude. Ponder this on the tree of woe. Sorry. I suppose I ought to remain silent after what you have said, but I cannot. My heart bleeds when I see you go from me. Let me go, the sun says. I shall return to you in a renewed form. Do you see the sun and how it sinks into the red mountains? This day's work is accomplished, and a new sun returns. When you are mourning the sun of today, must night fall, Jung says. And he says, the kid says, the sun, the god, whatever, it is not mother of the day. And Jung says, because of the night, I want to despair. And the sun god says, why lament in its fate? Let me go. My wings grow, and the longing towards eternal light swells up powerfully in me. You can no longer stop me. Stop your tears and let me ascend with the cries of joy. You are a man of the fields and think of your crops. I become light like the bird that rises up to the sky. And do not stop me. Do not complain already. I hover. The cry of life escapes from me. I can no longer hold back my serpent, or God damn it. I can no longer hold back my supreme pleasure. I must go up, and it happened at the last cord tears away, and my wings bear me up, and I dive into the sea of light. You who are down there, you distant twilight beings, you fade from me. Where have you gone? Jung says, something has happened. I am lamed. Has the God not left my sight? Where is God? What has happened? How empty and utterly empty. Should I proclaim to men how you vanished? Should I preach to the gospel of the forsaken solitude? Should we all go to the desert and strew ashes on our head, since our God has left us? I believe and accept that the God is something different from me. He swung high with jubilant joy. I remain in the night of pain, no longer with God, but alone with myself. Now shut your bronze doors and open the flood of devastation and murder brooding over the people. Open so as to midwife the God. Shut may mountains bury you and seas flow over you. I came to myself, giddy and pitiful figure. I didn't want this fellow as my companion. I found myself with him. I prefer a bad woman or a wayward hound, but one's own. This horrifies me. An opus is needed that one can squander decades on. And to do it out of necessity, I must catch up with the peace of the Middle Ages within myself. We have only finished the Middle Ages of others. I must begin early in that period when the hermits died out. Antisemitism, Inquisition, torture are close at hand and oppose themselves, and the barbarian requires barbaric means of education. You are a barbarian. I want to live with you. Therefore I will carry you through an utterly medieval hell until you are capable of making a living with you bearable. You should be the vessel and womb of life, and therefore I shall purify you. The touchstone is being alone with oneself. This is the way. Come on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
If you're considering supporting the show on Subscribestar, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on over there. The degree of the Red Archive, which is the $1 a month, you get access to some bonus audio, but there's also 50 plus hours of archived episodes. These are older episodes. They're not on the stream anymore. It's the only place to find them is in the Red Archive. There's a $3 a month tier called